Thank you for joining us for our continued programming as part of our FSEA online learning experience. My name is Jeff Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of FSEA. Our next presentation is one of our virtual workshops entitled The Impact of Cold Foil on the Embellishment Landscape. We have a great panel today with diverse backgrounds and a lot of experience with cold foils and cast and cure, which we will discuss as well. I'd like to introduce our panel. Stefan Congram, who's technical print expert for Cartamundi and has a great deal of experience with applications of cold foil. Mike Cain, the president of Eagle Systems, a leading manufacturer of cold foil equipment. And Tim Cain, the president of Breit Technologies, who supplies cast and cure films and equipment for cast and cure. I want to welcome all our panelists today, and I think we will dive right into some questions. Although, one thing I will mention that although this program is pre-recorded, please feel free to send me any questions you might have when as you're watching this webinar. You can send those at jeff@fsea.com, and I will be sure to pass those on to the appropriate panel members. All right, I think we will we'll go ahead and get started here. Move this that way a bit. Our first question that we have here is, what are the best applications for cold foil? Are there certain markets or product types where cold foil is frequently used, or is there markets that you guys have seen that are that have been in a growth area? And we really could probably pass this on and answer this from cast and cure, some of the markets you've seen cast and cure being popular in lately. Stefan, I might start with you. What have you seen as some of the best applications for cold foil transport?
Thanks for having me, Jeff. We see a lot of cold foil applications in the folding carton and the rigid packaging industries. We also see applications in direct mail and obviously in publications. We do a lot of consumer products packaging within grocery, certainly cards and games. That's Cartamundi's forte. Collectible. We have some customers using it successfully in the cosmetics industry, and you'll also see it used in confectionery as well as pharmaceutical and nutraceutical.
Great. Mike, from your standpoint, you have a lot of different customers doing cold foil work. What are the markets you're seeing, or is there any new markets that you're seeing cold foil move into? Oh, did we lose Mike? Mike, we're not hearing you.
I'm sorry. Jeff, thank you very much for having myself here to speak to the group, and really appreciate this opportunity here to share my experiences with the cold foil. But we're talking about different markets out there, the high-end packaging, Estee Lauder, Polo, Godiva. These are all the brand owners that are really out there with the cold foil. The perfume business, chocolates and wine and spirits. Especially now with the COVID-19, the wine and spirits label market seems to have gone through the roof when it comes to foil. So I guess folks are drinking a little bit more, and even now, believe it or not, even some of the cannabis markets are actually going after some of the cold foil as well.
Great. Now, when you're talking about wine and spirits, Mike, and you see, of course, they've always been using foil for a long time, or in some way. Are you seeing growth in wine and spirits for sheet fed applications, or is it mostly web, or is it both?
Well, for Eagle, it's mostly sheet fed. The sheet fed guys are out there right now. They're actually coming up with we developed a new process back in 2016. We introduced it at Drupa, an uncoated cold foil, and that has a totally different look to it. And we have some customers out there / partners over in Europe. Innocence is one of them. MCC Labels another as well, that they are running cold foil on IML, but also Innocence is running on uncoated stocks, which is really growing rapidly in the wine and spirits. We have tons of wine labels that are done in uncoated stocks.
Now, maybe you can ask this. A lot of the wine labels we know several years ago went more to flexo and maybe foil, or that can even be done in line flexo. Now, when does it make sense that they would want to do, the labels, in a sheet fed, in a larger sheet fed form, in introduce the cold foil? When does that make more sense?
Not because I'm in that side of the world, but after looking at the flexo markets, flexo has come a long way, but you can't get what you can get in the litho world when it comes to detail. And on the high end side, folks really want that perfection where you can get it with litho and you can't get it with the flexo. So that's
Gotcha.
why you're switching over to the litho side.
Gotcha. So sometimes it may be just, wanting that extra top quality that they'll make that decision.
Yeah, see the edges of the foil when it comes to flexo is not clean. You're not able to do those screens, and there's certain things that are out of the detail itself is just not there, and the quality is just not there. And when you're talking high end stuff, that's why they switch over to the cold foil.
Gotcha. Tim, I might ask you, and we can kind of switch it to a little bit of the cast and cure side of things. Are you seeing any new markets for that? For the cast and cure product, and what has been really the best markets for that type of for the cast and cure product?
Oh, Jeff, I'd like to say thank you as well for having me as part of this panel. And I think to concur with what Mike is saying, I think we've seen some recent expansion in the cannabis markets, have really been a growth industry as we start to see more and more manufacturers enter the market with different products in different categories, whether it's edibles or traditional cannabis market. You're seeing the same challenges that our consumer product companies see in their retail space. They're dealing with a highly educated consumer that is looking for that product differentiation on the store shelf. So we are seeing quite a bit of looks for embellishment in that market. And kind of to piggyback onto what Mike was saying there too, I think one of the other benefits of cold foil that we're seeing for some of these other markets is speed. So the ability to do cold foil in line with the printing also offers some speed advantages, especially when you're talking about these long run markets as we're starting to see the backfill taking place because of the COVID-19. So I think there are definitely some manufacturing benefits of doing cold foil above and beyond just some of the look pieces that people are going for.
Great. It's interesting. We had another just a webinar we were doing earlier this morning, and they were talking about the cannabis market, and certainly the wine and spirits market came up too. That when you look at a point was made by one of the other panelists that there isn't a Marlboro in the cannabis market. There's all kinds of different suppliers, and so to try to differentiate themselves, what are they doing? Packaging is the big part of it. They are trying to differentiate themselves with cool foil, spot UV, really, stand out with, from their carton or packaging. And that can make a big difference. And we know that's been a big thing with wine and spirits for a long time, that, studies show that people that go into a liquor store for wine, most 90% don't know what kind they're going to get when they walk in. And so, having those embellishments can make a big difference. So that's interesting that's where you guys are seeing a lot of the growth for gold foil, end caps, and cure.
Jeff, this is Mike King. I just wanted to share a job that was actually done this week. It was done by Colgate. And believe it or not, they're starting to put hemp. So I'm not one with the cannabis too much, but I'm looking at this packaging. It's gold, and it has cold foil on it. It's been ran at McLean Packaging just the last 10 days. And right on there is, pictures of cannabis and Colgate toothpaste now with cannabis. So that's the
Oh,
new
really?
thing. Oh, yeah. I have samples.
It's the recipe. Wow.
So you can really enjoy brushing your teeth in the morning
There you go.
with a smile.
Excellent. All right. Well, we'll move on to the next question. What are the main strengths and advantages of cold foil over other metallic decorating processes? Mainly, we know our more conventional foil stamping that's done, as well as now, we know digital foil is part of is part of the choices that are out there today. So what's the main strengths of cold foil over these other metallic processes? Mike, I might start with you on this one.
Sounds good, Jeff. Well, as you know, I'm hot foil for 45 years now, so I'm on both sides of the fence there with the hot and the cold. But I've learned over the years that with the cold foil, we get a lot less defects in registration. First of all, there is no registration defects because it's printed in line and perfect registration from the first sheet that's been dialed in to the last sheet. Compared to the hot foil, always spot on. And the edges are a lot cleaner on cold foil as opposed to hot foil. You don't have to worry about small type clogging up or filling in. And we're able to run at high speeds all day long. Cold foil likes speed. We have machines out there that are running, at a regular speeds, 13 to 14,000 sheets an hour. And then we got the large volume companies out there that are running, closer to 16 and 17,000 and as high as 18,000. And cold foil does not hold you back from speed. And those same type of jobs, just like the one I was just talking about with the toothpaste, if that was a hot foil job, because it was tight registration, if I had to guess on a real good machine, brand new, hot foiler with brand new registration on that press, you're talking maybe you'll be able to get 4,000 an hour on the floor in the hot foil world. Same exact job, and this job, I believe, could be a hot foil job all day long. And then on the met pole side, the advantages of cold foil is you don't have to worry about, the opaque colors, nothing special for the glue flaps. Even the scores, when you're scoring a box, it's so much better on the cold foil than it is on Met Poly. Because you're not printing on plastic, the material, and you're not dealing with the drying issues or, let's say, even the detail of the prescription on the back of the box or description, drying issues. I think Stefan could probably jump in on this part of it. When you get that, I know that folks tell me that when you get to that small black type on type of opaque white, becomes a little situation. Could you step into that there, Stefan, maybe?
Sure, Stefan. Yeah, if you tell us what you see as strengths and advantages.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Definitely when you're overprinting on top of opaque whites, that black is going to, end up gray. It's really, really tough to get a true black over an opaque white. It's really tough to actually get an opaque white that's not cream color if we wanted to go all the way back to the start. The thing I like the best about cold foil is it allows for so much flexibility when you're trying to cost engineer and win a project with a customer. Cold foil is unmatched in flexibility for pricing. You can rotate cartons to get better foil utilization. You can run narrow webs, 3 to 4 inch webs. Where on a Met Poly, it's a 40-inch sheet. It's a full size sheet, whether you like it or not. The design potential for cold foil as well with the fact that you can overprint on top of silver to make any color under the rainbow. You certainly can't hot stamp a rainbow, and I know digital has its limitations as well. And it also eliminates the need for secondary stamping processes. So your throughput is going to be through the roof when compared to all of your other options. It's certainly the fastest and the most productive way to put foil on a sheet. And then the other nice thing, which is pretty obvious, is that when you're doing cold foil, you're not locked into any dyes, any hot stamping dyes that can't be changed. You're simply changing the graphics on your plate, hanging a new plate, and off you go again.
Mike, I know Mike mentioned this, is that, that you can run at really high speeds now. Cold foil's been around, even sheet-fed cold foil's been around for a while, but I mean, Mike, you might make a comment on this, but I think it's probably seen, more growth in recent years, because at one point the foil just couldn't run at those speeds. But today, and I guess hats off to some of our foil manufacturers. Today, they've now created foils that can stay up with those printing presses and run at the higher speeds. Is that correct?
Yes. And just recently, ITW in the last several months introduced a new foil called ICF2. And with that foil, we ran testing out at Johns Burns alongside of all the foils, and all the foils offer something different. Some of them, over the years, some are a little bit better than others, and some have passed the others, and they've all been jockeying for position. But right now, ITW is with at least 150 point higher gloss level than the others, and that they've been holding that position for about 6-7 months now. I did the testing personally out at Johns Burns in Chicago, and we ran it on uncoated stocks, coated stocks. We had a big silver hot foil stamp piece that we worked with, that we did a comparison with, and we were hitting gloss levels on the hot foil of 640, 650, what we used to meter, and we did the same thing with the cold foil, and we were off 10, 15 points at most, which is minuscule. You couldn't even, somebody like Stefan might be able to see it, but myself, I couldn't see it. I don't know what it means, but 150 points is a major step for cold foil.
Oh, that's and I think that's the other point, that again, cold foil's been around for a while, but certainly we've seen foils improve on speed, and then also certainly that the metallic shine to the foil has improved tremendously through the last several years, which has made a big difference. Tim, I don't know if you have anything to add here. The advantages of cold foil, can cross over, because of course cast and cure can be applied on the same type of equipment. Anything else you see as the strengths and advantages?
Well, I would say that we're definitely starting to see the embellishment side increase on the digital market. One of the areas that we have seen is equipment like the Scodix and the MGI equipment are definitely starting to take the foiling to the small market, or the short run market, which is something that really up until a few years ago was just there wasn't any embellishment options available for those extremely short runs. And so the ability to look at cold foil without any of the tooling cost to enter it, you were definitely starting to see some expansions of the cold foil in those markets, as well as with cast and cure.
And this is something we talked about, because we had one of our webinars on the digital decorating side, that and I think this transfers over to cold foil, to cast and cure, to maybe conventional. That some of the digital processes is helping those processes, because smaller run. We talked about it smaller run packaging or folding cartons, like introduction small runs can be done on some of those digital presses and digital decorating like an MGI or Scodex. But once that would go into a large production run, then it doesn't make sense anymore. So how are we going to do that? Are we going to do it cold foil? Are we going to do it more conventional foil stamping? But it provides more opportunities, I think, when those types of products grow, or maybe it was just a small special run and now they want to do it for all of their cartons, it may go to, it then needs to go to a cold foil. So sometimes it all can work together. Okay, let's move on here to this question. What are the limitations of cold foil? We've talked about a lot of the advantages, and when is it best to consider possibly foil stamping or digital that Tim just alluded to, that there's some applications there. Cold foil has some great applications, but may not be the best for everything. Stefan, I know you've been involved with your current position and even before Cartamundi. When does it not make as much sense, and maybe you're looking at more of the conventional way?
I would say on extremely short runs, it's not going to be competitive with traditional hot stamping or digital process. But once you get past that, it's going to be one of your best options for medium to high volume. The other limitation of it is that if you're not starting out with a really good sheet, if we could put paper into tiers, where I would say a sheet with a cast coated surface would be the best thing to cold foil on, and then a number 1 or a number 2 gloss sheet would be the next best thing, and then I'd classify the third tier as everything else. Cold foil is not going to be a good option if you're going to try and put a really bad sheet in there. You're going to see all of the faults with that sheet surface and the pits and the pickouts. As where hot stamping, you can almost bend the paper to conform to your will. If you understand what I'm trying to say. There's also limited variability with cold foil when compared directly with digital foiling. Obviously, it's more variable than hot stamping. Hot stamping, you're locked into a die. Cold foil requires plates. And then, just like anything else, it's a bit of an art to get really good at this. So one of the limitations would be education and knowledge of the user, and that goes all the way from the prep department and pre-press. And Mike's probably tired of hearing me say this, but one of the most important things people need to understand about cold foil is that anything that you give that press, whatever is on that plate, whatever it's come out of your prep department, all of those decisions that you've made for screenings, for chokes, for trapping, whatever is on that plate is going to come out like that on the press. The press has very limited ways to change the results. So pre-press is a huge component of this, and that's why I would say it's a limitation, because there's not a lot of people that really grasp the importance of that.
Great, thanks, Stefan. Mike, what else would you like to add to that? I know you're doing some things, education, to try to get more people educated, because I'm sure that is very important on this side. What do you look as some of the limitations, or you've been in hot stamping too, that when jobs make more sense to go that direction?
Right. Well, I do agree with mostly of what Stefan said, but then I do disagree with some of what's really important, and what's education is definitely important out there for the cold foil side, and that's why we started the certification courses years ago, and we still do it after the folks have their machine a few months. We're dealing with a different type of mentality, I should say, as far as on the print side. We're dealing with people like Stefan, not to knock you, Stefan. I'm only kidding. But what I'm saying here is, when it comes to hot foilers, I always say to people that they're like doctors. They're, always practicing, and they got a totally different mindset in this world as far as how hot foil works. When you go to the printing world, the guys that print, I would say a good 70% of them will tell me, I'm a printer, I'm not a foiler. Foiling department's over there. Okay. And basically it's all education, but comparing hot foil to cold foil is really simple in my world compared to hot foil. Now, you can make it very complex if you want, and you can also do like what Stefan does, which is an amazing, he does amazing work when it comes to pre-press. It's a world that I don't understand like he does, and I probably know 5% of what he knows when it comes to the pre-press side, and that's why I use his abilities whenever I can. Because that does make a major difference. But the difference between Stefan and most folks out there, he's a perfectionist and he knows what he's looking for, and everything he's ever done with cold foil truly has amazed me, and that's why I do use them. But in the real world of packaging, we're not there. Okay, a lot of the large companies are just putting down solids out there and they're replacing hot foil. So there is a little bit of a different balance the way I look at it. But the limitations on cold foil, I always tell people the sky's the limit. Okay, it's just a matter of what type of work you're running. Are you running that Godiva work? Are you running that polo work? Or really the majority of the work out there in foil is the everyday work that's out there. It's not like the percentage of high. That's where Stefan really comes into play, and his abilities are amazing when it comes to that. So that's my take on that.
One of the things, and maybe more Mike and Stefan, but you mentioned earlier that, and somewhat my opinion is that cold foil definitely in most applications is a better choice than the film, the foil laminated met poly. Just for some reasons you guys said, that you can knock out the areas where you may have to put small black print that can be printed directly on the stock, and you don't have to put down opaque white. And then also even from a cost standpoint, I think you guys would agree, because that the foil board can get very expensive, and being able to do the cold foil can help with that as well. So I see that as the huge, as the big advantage a lot of times of cold foil. And then one limitation I'll mention too would be if you have a carton or if you have a job that where they would like to have foil and embossed, that the image is foil and embossed, it may make more sense to put it on a conventional press where they can foil emboss combo in line if embossing is going to be involved.
Yep. And just to touch on that, Jeff, on the met pole side, laminated board side, you might not have all those jobs that are 100% coverage. And if you really think about the jobs that are ran on met pole, even Colgate boxes have been done that way for years. And when you look at that, look at the glue flaps, look at the back of the box, look at the sides of the box where you didn't need foil. And if you look at the design of the box, most of them were not designed for foil, but the foil was there. So, okay, we're not going to cover it up because it's going to cost us more money and more aggravation. Well, with cold foil, you can reverse it out, or you can run narrow webs. You can run narrow webs down to 2 inches wide, or 4 inches, 5 inches. You can run one strip of foil anywhere on that sheet. When it comes to laminated board, you're still paying for the full sheet, no matter what you do. It's always the full sheet. So, it's savings there.
And if you really look at it too, I think sometimes, the side panels or the back of, let's say, a carton, they might even utilize, some of the foil coming through in those areas because they have it, as you said, because the full sheet is metallic. But does that even really make sense? Because what are they really wanting? They're wanting the consumer to walk down the aisle and see their product. And that's going to be the front of their carton. That's what's really important. So I think that's a very good point, that, that's what's important to embellish is the front, not as much other areas of the carton. Stefan, would you agree with that?
I'd agree with that as well. And just to add, I'm noticing a trend with a lot of our clients where they're coming out today and announcing that all of their single-use packaging is going to be plastic free come 2022. They're giving themselves a year to 18 months to make these changeovers. And a lot of stuff that we're doing right now that is on a Met Poly, we're seeing more and more requests for that to be completely recyclable, and obviously with that carrier, it's problematic. So what we've been pushing towards is a zero gauge, which is a great solution. But the problem in the market right now is that not all vendors can produce Met Poly where they can rewind that carrier. So there's going to be a bit of a vacuum coming up as more and more companies take on plastic-free initiatives. And the nice thing about cold foil is that carrier rewinds onto the roll, stays on your press, and your packaging that comes through is going to be recyclable.
Great. Tim, anything you'd want to add on the any limitations, that you see, from cold foil / catch and cure?
I would, just to echo Stefan's point right there, that about the recyclability. That's definitely one of the areas that we see a big push taking place, and we're getting similar requests from around the world. The market in India, which is one of the largest consumer markets in the world, that has almost no recycling capabilities at all, are pushing now away from the plastic packaging that they really embraced for years and trying to go to a more compostable product market. So I think that is one of the benefits that when you look at getting away from the Met Poly to a cold foil application or a cast and cure application to get that embellishment look. I think we're going to start to see that push really happening on a global scale, not just here domestically. From a limitation standpoint.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, from a limitation standpoint side, one of the things that we always become, everything is compared. So when you look at comparisons and you look at opportunities, recently when we were doing the Gold Leaf Award judging, one of the products that we were really talking about that showcased very well was the Super Bowl magazine cover. That was one of the souvenirs for the people that had purchased the tickets. And the cover on that had multiple levels of holographic in it. It had multiple levels of transition taking place, with print taking place over the top of it and register with the print. And there's always going to be a need in that market to have that higher level of embellishment. And so the ability to create truly customizable holographic images where really cost is of no expense, when they can come in and create multiple tiers, either from a security standpoint or from an embellishment standpoint, there's always going to be a need for those markets. And I don't think cast and cure cold foil will ever be able to overtake those markets.
Yeah, there's applications for that for sure. And we'll talk a little bit more about, we've kind of just sustainability. We'll talk a little bit, but I know there's some advantages of cast and cure with that I'll let you kind of touch on in a little bit here, Tim.
Okay.
So there's been always, we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but, we can talk briefly more about it, but, there's certainly been myths about cold foil, about in the past, and how have these been overcome in the last few years? again, I think, we've already talked about it a little bit, but Mike, how have you seen your customers yourself as a cold foil machinery supplier? How have you overcome any of the, myths or things that may have been a problem a while back but aren't anymore?
Well, some of the myths were, well, first of all, roll changes took a long time, it took an hour, which wasn't true even back then until we started testing it out and seeing what we could do. We can get that down to a 5-minute roll change or even less if we have to, depending on how we do that. The other thing is long make-ready times. That was one of the biggest myths. I would walk into people and talk to them about cold foil and say, we don't have time on our press because, on a 10-color printing press and their hourly rate is $200 an hour. So at $2,000 an hour for all the towers, it's $200 per tower, how they would bill out up in New York. And they would say, well, that's $2,000. And I can't be down for an hour doing a roll change or long make readies. The other thing that they were talking about years ago with the myths were the different substrates. It was like cold foil only works on one substrate. Well, today we work on literally every substrate, but it's depends on the look that you're trying to accomplish. And one other is, which was actually on some of the websites out there for years, of you can't emboss cold foil. Well, that's also a myth because my business cards have been embossed for years and it's all cold foil. Well, you got one bit of hot foil on it, and you also have, and that was done flat stamping, and it was actually done at Cartamundi. My business cards about 6-7 years ago. And then we also embossed the actual eagle on my card so I could actually prove to people that it can be actually done. And that's another thing also that people do if they have only cold foil today. Most folks that have packaging houses, they might not have a hot foil machine in there, but they have to have the hot foil look. And what they'll do is they'll actually do embossing or flat embossing, they call it, or deboss, just to give it the hot foil look. Now, if you emboss cold foil, and I gave you a piece, which I always do when I walk into presenting cold foil to people, I say, look at my card, tell me what's hot foil, what's cold foil. So I let a little secret out. The only thing hot foil on my card is the red, and everything else is cold foil. And the word Eagle System, everybody always says, well, that's hot foil, and so is your red. So that's debossed on my card, and you can't tell the difference.
Interesting. Stefan, anything that you've seen, you've been involved with this for a little while, so what have you seen out there that, maybe there was myths about cold foil versus, let's say, hot foil that have been overcome in the last few years?
Sure, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Mike touched on it earlier. I think the biggest one that I hear the most commonly is that it's not as shiny as other processes, but clearly with the advancement in technology and materials, it's right there today, in my opinion. People also have to remember, if you're going to put cold foil, shiny cold foil on a gloss sheet, you're not really doing yourself any favors on the contrast side. And again, this isn't a design conversation, but I like to always include these little tidbits. I usually like to put a matte wherever my cold foil is not, to really bring it to the front. The other thing is that another myth is that cold foil is difficult, and I would disagree with that. I think that if anybody has proper process control, and especially those within the Eagle family, if they follow the process, as Mike alluded to, it's fast. He does a really good job with education and awareness after the fact, with his Eagle certification training programs, and he really keeps everybody in the loop on any new developments. And you can call him or any of his guys 24 hours a day, and you're always going to get somebody that picks up the phone and wants to help you. I think probably the most important thing is that cold foil. When I first entered the industry with cold foil, nobody knew really what it was. You'd go to a brand or an agency, or you'd go and have a conversation with a designer, 8 or 9 years ago, and you'd say cold foil, and you'd have to explain it all the way from the back. And we used to have the books where you would show them the blank sheet, and then the adhesive, and then the foil, and then the ink. You would show them the whole layering process. That's gone now. I find for the most part that everybody has at least a baseline understanding of what cold foil is, and sometimes you'll even get purchasing departments that are very savvy because they know where you can cut costs and save money and still really get the same product that you would if you were going to hot stamp or digitally embellish something.
Great, thanks, Steph. Next question here: are there potential opportunities for finishing operations in cold foil? Mike, this may be more to you than anything, because you've been involved in working with finishing operations a long time too. Do you see that? I wonder if there can be some opportunities down the road for the actual finishers with cold foil.
Well, to touch on that, I've had a few customers out there. One of them was a company called Nickard over in Germany, and I'm going to be brutally honest here. I don't agree with having that market out there as far as doing lay down silver. There are a couple of companies worldwide that are doing it, about 5 or 6, okay, where they are laying down a cold foil and then delivering it to a print house, and then they're doing the finish work. There is a couple of companies now that have decided, well, that didn't work out, so now we're putting the foiler onto a longer press, and we're heading more towards the packaging world and doing the whole package. Trying to do it offline and doing cold foil, and I have this argument almost all the time with a lot of I want to say the third world countries that I do business with. They want to do it on an offline. I have a 2-color press. Let's add an eagle to it. And I just say, one day when you want to do it the way you really should do it, please come back to me, because it really doesn't work out that way, because you lose so much benefit, as I'm sure Stefan would share with as well. If you're missing out that registration and you're trying to get, there's just too many variables. Again, Stefan's taught me a lot when it comes to, we've had a situation where we had a company that's running very, very light paper. I never knew paper could shrink the way it does or expand the way it does. When you're dealing with the packaging side, I didn't see that side of it. But when you're dealing with those labels, it's almost impossible. It comes down to even like the hot foil days, why people do hot foil stamping on half-size sheets, because of the registration at the tail end of the sheet. Nightmare when it comes to the hot foil. Well, you have that same problem, believe it or not, in cold foil, especially when you're doing an offline silver and then trying to come back and register it. And even if you're doing it in line, you still have to be careful if you're doing a second pass on the same press. So I encourage people not to go that direction.
Great. Now let me ask you this, Mike, real quick though. If there was applications where somebody was producing cold foil sheets, to then go to a printer, really to replace the met poly, so the whole sheet is silver, does that make more sense, or that would be okay as long as you're not, you don't have that registration once the sheet goes on press?
Absolutely. We have a customer over in the UK that does that. I would say 70 to 80% of his work is that work. So he's introduced a new. So
a finisher could potentially if they had the right situation, there could be an opportunity there if they are doing the entire sheet as a
Absolutely.
full silver sheet.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That way. Or they can even put a strip down, or they can put blocks down where somebody says, well, I have an overprint job and I have a square that's 3 inches by 4 inches. And that's where it works, because in the overprint world, a lot of those jobs that were replaced over the years, folks would go out there and put a hot foil block down. And as you know, Jeff, if you don't have that make ready perfect and you deboss that sheet just the slightest amount, or your registration is off because now you're trying to take a reciprocating type press and move it over to a sheet fed litho press that is, passing the baton type feeding. When I say reciprocating, on a bop style press, that sheet's coming in and stopping. Okay. Plus you're going with different gripper bars. So all that comes into play. But when it comes to the cold foil side, if you were to do it offline and do those blocks, well, you'll be a lot tighter registration with that than you would be with hot foil for sure.
Great. All right. I'm sorry. Did somebody
if I
say
could
something?
just touch on that a little bit.
Sure, Tim.
Having that on a offline equipment also does give you some other design capabilities like cast and cure. We do have several customers that play in the finishing market that are using, cast and cure as a secondary embellishment after the job's been printed. So if a customer was making an investment into like a 2-color press to have cold foil capabilities, they could utilize that equipment to do other things besides just cold foil.
Tim, that's a great point. And, we haven't, we're going to touch a little bit here to give you an opportunity on the cast and cure, but real quick, most applications for cast and cure is putting utilizing the whatever design, clear holographic design over the entire printed sheet. That's the most common use. And you're right. So again, I think as Mike points out, the big downfall with that is the registration. But if you're dealing with applications where registration really isn't a situation, then then I think it's maybe there are some potentials there on the finishing side. So I think that's a couple very good points. And I think we'll kind of move right into that. And I'll just let you, Tim. We've touched on cast and cure, and I think a lot of our audience has an idea of cast and cure. There are people in the industry, the people that'll be watching this or are involved in the industry, but I think there's still, certainly some that don't understand the process. If you can explain it real quick, and certainly how it's different than cold foil.
Well, and I appreciate this opportunity to do that because, Stefan, I wish when you were out educating some of these procurement people, you could take the opportunity to educate them on cast and cure as well. I find myself in a lot of situations where about 50% of the people I'm talking to are just not familiar with the process, or they think that it is some type of a clear cold foiling application. So I do appreciate this opportunity to kind of talk about our technology a little bit. Cast and cure is similar in cold foil in that we're using a web of material that is being temporarily laminated to a printed product and then delaminated off. And in a cold foil environment, part of that layer, that foil layer, is being removed and transferred to the substrate. With cast and cure, we're using a casting film that has a pattern that's been embossed into its surface. And instead of using an adhesive, we're putting down a varnish layer or coating layer and we're of UV, and we're laminating the two surfaces together. And that pattern that's been embossed into the casting film molds that varnish into the shape, some light diffusing shape. Typically, it's either a matte finish or it's a holographic finish where we're molding that shape in place, and then the UV light cures that varnish. our film is then delaminated off. Unlike cold foil, where we're actually removing a layer from the base material, our film is it's more of an embossing die. It's designed to emboss that varnish into the shape we want it. And then when it's peeled off, that embossing die is rewound and can be reused over and over again.
Great.
Is that?
Yeah, I think that's great, and that gives us a good idea of where, how it's used and how it is different. And we've kind of touched on this already. I don't know if there's anything else on this part, though, Tim. Specifically cast and cure. I had just mentioned, and I think you would agree because you and I have talked about it, that unlike cold foil can be used, I think, or hot foil can be utilized in different areas of a design. Maybe it's just the main headline if it's on a carton or anything else. The cast and cure is really best used to cover at least the front cover of if it's a carton or a label. But any other comments on the markets that it's being used in or best applications?
Well, I think you definitely hit a point there that cast and cure, unlike foil, where foil is used to kind of highlight specific areas to draw attention to it, cast and cure is used more of a broad brush than a fine detail brush. The ability to put a large area of clear holographic over certain parts of a package helps to accentuate that package a little more boldly, where I think foil has a tendency to be kind of a highlight area. And there are applications where they're putting a heavy foil in the background and printing over the top of it to get certain embellishments or certain looks. But the cast and cure really is designed more to kind of give the overall package kind of a feel or a look and give some color shifting to attract the customer's eye to that movement. As for certain markets, we've started to see more and more applications in the shrink sleeve market, as well as in the tube market. Those are two areas that continue to expand for us, that we see more and more applications taking place. And then obviously we have our core markets of cartons and prime labels, which are probably the two biggest applications.
Great. And we've talked about cast, some of the advantages of both cold foil and cast and cure. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on. Certainly the ability to reuse the film, because it's not transferring the foil like cold foil or hot foil does. You actually are, creating that micro embossed holographic look into the product. It can be the reusability, I think, is probably one of the main advantages.
I absolutely. People always ask, how many times can you reuse the film? And I'll let Mike kind of comment on this as well, because I know some of his customers are using the technology. But we typically say somewhere between 10 and 20 reuses of the film. And the ability to reuse that film that many times really brings the cost benefits of cast and cure into place. When you look at the cost of cast and cure compared to other holographic techniques, whether it's cold foil, hot foil, or lamination, it really is done at a fraction of the cost. So that's probably the biggest draw for a lot of our customers, is the cost benefit, but there are also some main benefits around sustainability, and then also that design flexibility of only applying the hologram where you want it to go, and not having to use opaque white to cover up the non-desired holographic areas.
Great. Mike, you have some customers using it with your equipment. What have you seen out there and some of the advantages of cast and cure?
Yes, I do have some customers out there, actually down in Argentina, and actually Cartamundi has a system as well. We ran some jobs over there. And some of the newer equipment that's out there and available, they have the LED UV systems on there, and that's where the real advantage comes in, because they've come out with some nice coatings that do work with the LED, and it also makes the film last that much longer because it's a lot cooler environment as opposed to the standard or the conventional UV systems, and it allows them to the film to last quite a bit longer as well.
That's very interesting. I have a little bit of knowledge in that area, and yeah, and I know that LED does run much cooler, so that's is that an advantage? I might ask real quick, Mike, is having LED UV curing an advantage on the cold foil side too?
We have a couple of customers that are running on the LED side, and right now we have one that runs IML label, and that's a major advantage there because average run speed on that machine is 15,000 an hour, and it's very, very large volume runs. I mean, if you look out there today, you'll see actually Cain is a soap, I think it's a like a laundry soap. That's all done cold foil. Mobile one is cold foil, and that's all IML. And that today that's widely used. We're putting in another one, a second machine, and that'll be done on IML, and that'll also be LED, and that'll be going in the middle of July. And that company there, they'll be running, 100% IML on that machine.
Now, when you say, and for everybody out there, IML meaning in mold labels, right?
Correct.
And is the reason the LEDs is the reason that it's works very well on that is because a lot of that stock is a thin plastic, like a thin plastic film stock. Is that correct?
Yes, and I've learned quite a bit in the printing world as far as that side of it too. My first customer was a company called Unigraph, who bought the very first Eagle. That was all IML, and still today they run IML, and they're in Warsaw, Poland. But they did it with conventional UV, where today with the LED, the cylinders are, although there's heat in there, there's nothing compared to standard UV. And even cylinders on some of these presses are actually water-cooled cylinders on the, as you guys call it, the back cylinder. In the printing world, I call it an impression cylinder. They're actually water-cooled to cool them down for the IML world. So heat is an issue, and running the LED for cold foil or casting cure is phenomenal.
Tim, you mentioned that a growing area for you is like the shrink sleeves. I would think that might be a situation there as well. You may know that maybe they might be using the LED curing, the UV LED curing for that as well for it because of heat.
Well, and that's definitely an area that we have done a lot of work in over the last probably 5 or 6 years is LED curing. LED does bring a lot of benefits, especially around the heat portion of it, which is something that can be detrimental to getting the reusability of the casting film. But there are also some benefits that casting cure bring to the table for LED curing. One of the challenges with the LED photo initiators is the oxygen scavenging that takes place when it's being cured in an open air environment. So when the LED light hits it and starts the curing process, those free radicals, the oxygen scavenges those free radicals as it starts to cross-link. So the ability to create an oxygen-free environment where the film is holding that oxygen away from that surface as it's being exposed to light, we've seen increased cure speeds, we've seen increased run times, we've seen a lot of different benefits to that as well.
Okay, Tim,
so
you're starting to kill me with science here now. You know that.
Yeah, I know that's more of a specialized topic for certain areas, but that's some testing that we've done quite a bit recently with one of the new Phosion lamp systems that they have in place that we're running LED at over 800 feet a minute with a single lamp.
Since we're talking about this, Stefan, I don't want to leave you out. Have you guys switched anything over to LED curing for foil or cast and cure?
Not yet, but it's certainly something that we're giving a hard look at.
Yeah. I think there's some main advantages that, I'll just say, because again, I'm familiar with the process that real quick, because we don't spend too much time, but, a disadvantage of it, just like anything that's newer, is cost. LED has a fairly large cost to it right now, but I think it's continuing to go down. I think you're going to see more and more of it for, curing inks, curing coatings. It's going to continue to grow.
I agree with that. And in terms of just print in general, foil and everything else aside, anytime that you can remove heat from a printed sheet going through a press, there's just going to be benefits down the line for almost everything you're trying to do. The more you bake that sheet, the more moisture comes out of it, and then your finishing processes and your secondary processes have a lot of challenges, based off of trying to work with a sheet that's been cooked and is cracking on you.
I think there's no doubt. Because we're getting a little short on time, really, quickly, and I think we've touched on it, Tim, but this, it kind of goes back to cold foil and cast and cure. Any sustainability comments, if you want to make as far as cast and cure?
Well, probably the biggest, piece that we talk about is the reusability of the casting film. So being able to take a film and reuse it 20 times, you're shipping 1/20th of the material that you need to create that decorative packaging. You're also, whether you're doing cold foiling or whether you're doing cast and cure, you can reduce down the weight of that package that you're embellishing when you compare it to putting down a matte poly lamination over the top of it. And then obviously that recyclability of that final product. We always, say cast and cure isn't magic. We can't make your package recyclable, but we will not affect its recyclability. So we when we put, whether it's cold foil or cast and cure onto a package, that package can still enter the recycling stream the way that it was designed. Where if you have the matte poly or you have some other lamination processes in place, those are going to require some specialized handling to still be recycled.
Mike, any other comments on sustainability from your side?
Well, we're getting asked that question quite a bit, and as you've spoken, Jeff, we definitely have to get some more answers to the PIRA report, and we need to really work on that closely to get those answers for our members of the FSCA and all the foilers out there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, and we are in the midst of having another report completed, and Mike and I talked about this, and he helped kind of get some things started on it, and we've worked with Georgia Tech Technology Department at Georgia Tech University. So just so those who are listening, I'll be touching on that on one of our sustainability discussions for the conference coming up, that's part of this 2-day conference. So we'll talk more about that soon, and that'll be good for cold foil, hot foil, digital foil, cast and cure. It'll kind of come across all of it. Okay. I think we'll end there, guys. Thank you so much for, joining us and be part of this panel today. I want to take a minute to thank all of our sponsors for our online learning experience. Without them, we couldn't do this. those sponsors are Bops, Duplo, Kerr's Transfer Products, H&M, Infinity Foils, Metal Magic, Mueller Prost, Sakurai USA, Eagle Systems, Univaco, and Universal Engraving. I want to thank them again, and I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to be part of our panel today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.